Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Just waiting for a couple more people to join this afternoon's webinar, and we'll kick off shortly. All right, great. Well, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. My name's David Jacobs, the Head of Technical Consulting here at Vitech Technology. And this afternoon, we are going to talk about AI, or more specifically, Microsoft Copilot. Today, we're going to work through what is Copilot and how it works, how we can prepare your organisation to use Copilot or what that journey looks like, and of course, looking at how we can assess the environment. Now, join this afternoon with me is our partner technology specialist for Microsoft, Philip Mayer. How are you this afternoon?
I am very well, thank you, David. It's good to be online with you and with all your clients. Thank you so much.
Excellent. No, thank you very much for affording the time this afternoon. Now, Philip, before we jump into this afternoon's webinar, I understand that you've been traveling all around a bit and speaking to a lot of businesses around Copilot. What seems to be the sentiment in the partner community and the businesses that you've spoken to around this exciting technology?
I'd have to say that if you use that old Gartner hype cycle, the hype and then the trough and the disillusionment and productivity, I'm finding that many people are spread across that line.
Yeah.
Some people are still in that hype phase and getting familiar with it. Some are in that point of disillusion that they think it's all bad and they're worried that the Terminator is going to be released when they get into this AI world. And others are actually on the journey where they're realizing that now that they've been enlightened, they're no longer disillusioned, that there is incredible productivity to be gained, but that needs to be done with a level of basically guidance, thought, responsibility, rather than just let's just go full on. There needs to be a measured approach to the adoption of this technology. And maybe I'll share some of the thoughts on that as we get into the content too.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And I echo your comments there. We've had a few partners or customers of ours that have wanted to, I guess, get the credit card out, so to speak, and deploy the licenses, and others that are taking a more measured approach. Now, before we launch in, if you've got a memory like mine, there is a Q&A session at the end, but please use the Q&A button to pop in your question as if there's any content that you want to know a little bit more about as we go through the presentation, so we can cover it off at the end. And at that point, Philip, let's hand over to you and maybe take us through what Copilot is and how it works.
Thank you, David, and thanks to the breadth of your team that's also joined today. The bigger thanks is to, gosh, you've got over 30 people who've joined, so that's very generous of them to give their time to hear a little bit about what is this thing called Copilot anyway. Maybe a little bit of a demonstration. It will be a recorded demonstration, if you forgive me, because it's just a little quicker to do it that way, and then some context around the Australian business. But as you pointed out, David, if anybody's got questions at any time, I'll do my best to keep the multitasking capability, the limited multitasking capabilities that I have in sync and to deal with that. Look, I thought I'd start with a bit of a chestnut slide here, which is, and is that coming through? Just to check, David, that that's coming through for you and to the attendees?
Yep, it is. Absolutely.
Okay, excellent. And it's just a slide that we produced some time ago, but it's been used quite effectively by my colleagues and around the industry is this point here about the time to adopt ChatGPT. And if I ask for a reaction button from people, if they know how to do a reaction, you might want to flag whether you've used ChatGPT, which was made available about 18 months ago now, November, I think it was the 16th, 2022. So, I can always remember that date because I only have to ask my daughter how old the twins are. and they were born in the same month, almost the same day as ChatGPT became available. But of course, incredible capability that is in that ChatGPT service to ask questions and get answers. Sometimes the answers you get are quite imaginative too. I know I've used it for things like holiday planning and turned up in Japan and a particular location, and it's given me 4 things to do over the 2 days I'm there, and one of them didn't exist. But that's the joy of using these generative consumer grade platforms. But, what is this trend? What AI has been around actually since 1957. It's just dawned on me how long it's been around. AI, using computers to do artificial thinking and prediction, has been around, 3 years before I was born. They were doing this sort of work. But those numbers that you can see, 3 months to hit 100 million users, is just remarkable, the adoption cycle. And possibly by the reactions of people online, we can see that a good number of people have actually been using that service. Now, as you may know, at the same time, Microsoft invested about $10 billion into a partnership with the founders of ChatGPT, as that service you see called OpenAI, Sam Altman and his team. And so that had given Microsoft the opportunity to work more closely with them in the development, the enhancement. And one of the first things we realized is that rather than jumping into a browser and putting in a question or asking it to do something, wouldn't it be good to have that experience embedded inside applications? So embedded inside Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Teams. Teams has been remarkable, the adoption of that to support that. Now, we actually took that early prototyping to an entity here in Australia called the Tech Council of Australia. You can search them, hopefully using Copilot, using an Edge browser. And because of the definitive nature it is, Copilot versus something like a Google search. And they came back with these figures, which are quite remarkable, to indicate the level of productivity gain and creativity gain and improvement in quality of work that could be realised by adopting Copilots with inside these applications. It was fascinating to me that when a group of economists were in one of those classic TV interviews recently, before we had the earnings announcement, our quarterly results, and there was all this fear about we were going to slip into recession, they actually said one thing we need to be conscious of as a community across Australia is don't lay off people. And 2 of them said we need to increase productivity by using generative AI. And one of them actually said you should be using the Copilot technology as a way to increase productivity and we can avoid the recession. Well, as it turned out, we did by only 0.02%, but we avoided that term, that ugly R word, recession, by increasing our productivity rather than laying off heads. Now, I mentioned ChatGPT, and I love ChatGPT for things like holiday planning or writing poetry, for that sort of creative writing in a personal consumer concept. But as many of you would know, I think there has been some absolute horror stories where businesses have used that as their platform for doing the same. I think one of the most probably overused example is Samsung. In effect, a developer at Samsung put some code into ChatGPT, asked it to enhance it, give it insights, and that code was then made publicly available to the point that a hacker was able to attack certain devices based on that code fragment. Another one that's well known is in the law case in America, where a lawyer asked for precedent with respect to a particular matter, and ChatGPT made it up, and the lawyer presented in the case. And the judge knew that that was rubbish because they knew all the precedent related to this particular matter, and the case was thrown out in the negative for that particular person who presented what was false information. Now, sadly, I've also seen situations right here in Australia where very significant businesses have had a new product that they've planned to launch and asked ChatGPT to create a marketing plan. A couple of days later, one of their competitors asked, "What's the marketing plan?" For what I'm rumoured to hear of my competitor creating a new product, it gave them the marketing plan and told them the product specifications. So it is a wonderful service, but appreciate that you're paying for the use of that service with your data. Okay, Phil, so you've created a horror story here. Well, I'm never going to use this generative AI. Well, that's exactly why we did work with OpenAI to create a model where your subscription, your data, is in your own subscription. It's not shared in a way that the large language model retains that knowledge of your information. Your data stays in your subscription, and you govern the control of that data within your subscription. Now, okay, Phil, you've created this bubble now. My business data, my spreadsheets, my documents, my conversations, my emails now don't leave my business. But then the smart ones here are going, but what about that individual inside my business who shouldn't see that piece of other data in my business? Human resource records, engineering documents, which are secure to the engineering team, senior management information that should only be seen by senior management as they're setting policy and standards and processes for the future. Well, that's a really good question. How do I govern the control of that? Well, many of the aspects of that capability sit inside your Microsoft 365 Business Premium, E3 and E5. And please do talk to the Viatech team about how you seek or should enable that components. And I'll cite for you two examples, if I may, and I've got time, David. It would be to say, we've already seen some organisations take a very non-measured approach to the deployment of Copilot, which is in effect the business-grade version of ChatGPT. They've deployed it in a private school right here in Sydney, and they made it available to the teachers so they could look at the creation of curriculum and class. They've given it to administrators to be able to get better insights to employee and payment of fees. And they gave it to the students at the same time. Within 2 weeks, one of the smart students asked, what's the salary of all the teachers in the school? And because they hadn't put the guardrails in, the governments, the permissions in place, that student got access to that information.
Wow. All I can say is probably not paid enough, but that's information you probably don't want public.
No, I'll give you another example, which is quite disturbing. And I came across this in my travels with one of the partners who came up to me to share after I told the private school story about how they deployed it in a construction company. And again, with that abandon of measured deployment, they gave it to senior management, the HR department, operations, accounts, and the construction workers and project teams and architects. A construction worker asked, very simple query, give me a list of all the female employees under 35 with their phone numbers. And they got it. And then they sent that out to their mates. Now, interestingly enough, they had actually deployed one of the little features of the Business Premium product, and it was picked up. That's the DLP. You might see that as the purple box at the top. So that's just one of the many capabilities that are available, but frankly have not been implemented in many businesses today. Now, DLP is a go-to for many organisations because it does address your notifiable breach obligations. So we picked up that there was confidential information, the age, the name, the date of birth, the phone number of these individuals, and so alarms went off. They could see that it wasn't going to an appropriate authority and appropriate remedial action was taken with that individual. It still meant that those mates of this construction worker had those phone numbers and names, but it should never have happened in the first place by applying appropriate disciplines around governance, permissions, labelling, and sensitive access to information. So I thought I'd start with the horror stories, but also give you some insight, and I'll continue to give some insight about that, enlightening that you can take control of this information if you take a measured and responsible approach. Now, I've mentioned this term Copilot. If you will, it's our term for generative AI, and it surfaces in many products that, again, the Viatech team can help you understand in more detail. And I've actually got a slide that takes you through a few in a moment. But I do get asked the question, what if I want something that's purpose-built for my organisation? What if I'm working in the mining industry and I want a Copilot for mining? I work in the legal community and I need something tailored to the needs of what lawyers need in terms of working with matters and tracking tasks. Well, actually, to that point, when I showed this to my daughter about a year ago, this is where we were heading, and she happens to be an equity partner in a fairly substantial law firm, She went back to London and went to the IT team and their partner in London, and they created a product called Co-Counsel. And that specifically works with mergers and acquisitions to ingest documents from the merging and acquisition partners, processes that, even though it might be written in Spanish or German or Korean, translates that all into English, and then draws mapping through clever questioning about where are the terms in these agreements where there's compatibility and mutual agreement, where are the terms where there is some challenges that we need to consider, and what in the past have we done to redress those sorts of gaps. So what used to take her 56 hours, I'm serious, she'd work for multiple days in a row and they'd feed her and her team, is now reduced to a matter of hours. Now, some of you online are going, but don't lawyers change by the hour? You are absolutely right. So it meant a change in their business model, one where they didn't charge the clients anymore by the hour, but by the outcome. So they were getting inordinate amounts of time back and addressing problems by using a tailored Copilot against the same data that they could use with one of the many Microsoft Copilots. So let's have a look at some of those Copilots. There are a lot, and this is actually only a small sample of what we do have now. You can see right there in the middle are those which we classify as the Microsoft 365 Copilots. There's one there for Word, so inside Word you can ask questions like, write me a document 3 pages long about this business case and proposal. Go into PowerPoint, you can reference a number of documents and say, create a PowerPoint presentation from these documents. Go into Excel, which could be tracks and tracks of data, and ask it to give you some insights. And Teams is probably the most popular one I find in those organisations who've adopted it, where they can ask for a recap or follow a meeting, identify all the actions that arose from the meeting. Now, I will call out there are a number of free ones. So there's a fee for Microsoft 365 Copilot, but if you use Edge, and I do call that out specifically, it will not work in Chrome, Google Chrome, because Chrome does not have sufficient security, because anything you do in Chrome is basically going back to Google, and that's not commercial data protection. So you do need to use Edge when you're using the Copilot to get all the value that is in it. And then you can see a smattering of other ones that exist across the Dynamics family to integrate with sales, to integrate with accounting. So what does that mean, Phil? So it's integrating with these CRM systems and ERP systems. It means you can actually sit inside Word or Excel and ask for things like, show me the top 5 performing customers out of our CRM system, along with their revenue data for the last 12 months on a month-by-month basis. It'll go into the CRM system, it'll go into the ERP system and bring that data back for you into your spreadsheet. There's also Security Copilot, which has been very well adopted here in Australia by leading organisations. You know, Australian Super, various different banks have used that to help them with their digital defence strategies. And GitHub Copilot was actually the first one out. It was one of the major reasons that we formed that alliance with OpenAI, because you've got to remember that Microsoft, 90% of our staff are involved in writing code. And so GitHub Copilot dramatically increased the productivity of our organisation. And similarly, household names in Australia like Atlassian and Canva also using GitHub Copilot to increase the productivity of their teams as well. So, you know, somebody said to me the other day, Microsoft's got more Copilots now than Qantas. And indeed, you know, that's just a small sample of our flight crew. There are many other Copilots that do exist to help in augmenting and extending the capabilities of the products. Now, as I mentioned earlier, David, we're kind of on that Gartner curve, adoption curve. And so there have been some organisations right here in Australia who've been using Copilot prior to its public release, which was really broad availability, was January this year. And we got some feedback from them actually back in November, as you'll see at the date on the bottom there, November 15, 2023. So they'd had access to this technology for a number of months. And this is the sort of figures we got back in terms of increasing productivity, quality of work, ability to focus. Now, if I turn those numbers into my own personal life, if you don't mind sharing some personal information, I'm getting back about 10 hours a week.
That's
seriously.
Wow.
10 hours a week. Now, the evidence of that is I work from home a lot. And when I work from home, start at the usual time after I've taken the dog for a walk and had breakfast and a chat. About 6 o'clock, I get on the knock on the door of my study to say, come on, dinner's on. Do you want to come and join me? From my wife. And I used to say, yeah, I'll be right there. And I end up leaving the office about 8 p.m. And she's already eaten. Now when she knocks on the door, I can tools down. Job's done. Copilot's done it all for me. I'm up to date. It's just breathtaking how this technology has improved the quality of my life to be able to spend more time with my family, let alone the quality of the information I'm able to produce at work. I like the fun fact over on the right-hand side, though. In those early adopters that had access to the technology, you can see that lunch comment. When certain individuals who were on that early adopter program were offered a free lunch once a month, they said no. 88% said no, you can keep your free lunch. And even when they went down to a weekly free lunch, once a week we'll give you a free lunch, 77% said still no, I'm going to keep using this Copilot. Don't you take that away from me. The number is even more significant if you look at our Copilot security product given to security analysts. These are top of the line security analysts, operators in businesses. 97% said no, you do not take this away from me. It has increased my quality and speed at which I'm able to resolve and identify issues in my business. Now, if I've got some time, I would like to play this little video. It is 4 minutes long, so please be patient. And also please appreciate it is in the context of a retail store organisation. We've got a pretty broad audience here today, haven't we, David? What sort of industries are we talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got people in the education, medical, construction sectors, also financial planners and lawyers on the call today. So a very broad representation of our customer base.
Well, I guess I'm asking them to open their minds and try and translate in this planning process we're going to see where an individual is trying to look at the opening of a new office. So think of you as a law firm, maybe opening an office in Brisbane or another location. Maybe if you're in the education space, you're thinking about adding another dimension to your academic portfolio, the skilling, whether we add more classrooms, that sort of thing. So let it play, and I just ask you to be understanding it's a retail scenario, retail store scenario, but maybe you can make some translations to your own world. So that video is actually up on YouTube. If you'd like to share it with your colleagues, you just have to search YouTube for that Microsoft 365 chat, and you'll find that particular video. Now, look, there were some amazing things to my mind within that, and most people probably would have reacted to that sounds like me. How do you think it learned to sound like you? Well, it looks back at all the documents, spreadsheets, conversations, emails you've written in the past and understands your style. Now, maybe you don't want that. I know some of my colleagues are going, oh, no, I don't want it to sound like me. I want it to sound a bit more professional or a little more casual. There is that ability to adjust the tone and style in that way too. But the thing that probably impressed me the most was, did you notice that the narrator mentioned going and asking for a store video? And if you saw the prompt, you might have noticed that the thing they wrote was about accessibility as they were opening the store. So they actually knew the video, knew that they were looking for what was in writing, accessibility, but it's a video with an audio track. So Copilot's able to translate that video into the textual stream, find the accessibility item, bring out the quote, and then add that into the conversation. So absolutely amazing. That's the bit that really gets me, to be able to go and search videos that might sit within the repository of your business and then get that out. I also like the 5 taglines. I don't know if you've ever had that writer's block. You've got to get a heading for a project plan, a business plan, a proposal, a marketing document. You're thinking, oh, you've got to have something catchy at the beginning. Well, you know, in terms of getting ready for an event like this one, when David and the team ask you to present, you got to go, what am I going to talk? He just tells you, get your bit background about what you want to cover. So I just put it into Copilot and say, give me 5 taglines for a topic. And it came back. I didn't have to agonize about what am I going to call it. It's just amazing when you get 5 options. You could make it 10, but I'm happy with 5. It's so cool. One of the ones that's also popular, this one's only a minute long, and I wanted to play it because it is one of the most used items that we're seeing already through the Copilot dashboard. There's a dashboard where you can see where the deployment usage in your business is moving. And again, with the help of Viatech, they can help you with seeing where that is, that usage through the Copilot dashboard. But I thought I'd play this one, if that's all right.
I think we're having a little bit of trouble with the video.
Okay, so it's not coming through.
It's just seems to be looping. I have seen this one, and most of our project managers are very excited about this technology, but the video seems to be looping and stopping and starting.
All right. Well, maybe I can talk through it. In simple terms, the video shows somebody who is too busy to attend a meeting. I might hit pause, and we're not going to be distracted by it trying to do this thing. I'll go to the next slide, but I'll talk through what happens. In simple terms, what happens there is, the individual isn't able to join a meeting, so clicks this thing called follow. And when they've got, and you know how people just don't respect our calendars anymore, so they throw meetings over the top, but you're interested in knowing what happened in the meeting, so you can say follow. And at the end, you get a transcript of the meeting, and you can say, well, what were the list of actions? And you can actually ask it questions of what was raised and what alternate decisions were presented by individuals in the meeting. It then goes on to say, okay, I want to join a live meeting, and maybe you're a little late, so you can hit recap, and it tells you what's happened so far. And then you can even ask, well, what sort of tensions arose, or what matters have been unresolved, and what proposals were made by people to resolve those items. So that again is a little video you can search for up on YouTube. So look for Microsoft Copilot for Teams, and you can watch those little videos. One is about following a meeting, and the other one is attending a meeting live. But they're absolutely one of the areas that I spend a lot of time. I can sometimes get triple booked. And then it simply becomes a case of which ones do I really want to express a live opinion on? So I join that one. And the other two, which might be more informative for me, I'll follow and then get the actions subsequent to that. Now, moving into that security, compliance, privacy, responsible AI element, David, you probably have an understanding of whether the clients on the call are on Business Premium, E3 or E5. I hope they are, because they get all of that security, compliance and privacy in the box with those versions of Microsoft 365. The challenging thing is they may not have turned those on. So it's a little bit buying a car and not putting the seatbelt on. So you've really got to spend time to get that security and compliance by implementing the elements that do exist in those boxes. And I'm sure, David, your team is there to help the clients with the implementation and the effectiveness of many of those components. So if we think about the things that are in terms of the Microsoft 365 Business Premium, the E3 and the E5, this is just a quick tapestry of all of the different elements that exist in there. You've got the Defender product, which is, and of course I work for Microsoft, I'm going to say it is the best XDR product going, and that's independent research from MITRE and AAA. They're organisations that test these products all the time. You've got Defender for Office 365, which is a business email compromise defence product, is in the box as well. So that's where you're getting suspicious emails into your business with attachments. It's able to review those attachments, potentially detonate them and prevent users from opening them or websites. That Azure Information Protection is a really good one. I've had a lot of conversations on that one recently, particularly with law firms and companies creating their own IP, where they want to ensure that the information is maintained confidential to their business and nobody can copy the information into a personal space. So by enabling information protection, they can't just copy and paste the document into a personal OneDrive or a personal Dropbox or a Google Drive. It says, no, you can't copy that. And even when they try and do a screen grab, using that Alt-Shift-S button, they can snip the screen. It doesn't permit them to paste that into a window, which is a personal experience part of their environment. It only permits copying and pasting in that space. Then there's a whole lot of management technologies for managing the devices and setting up conditional access, and then the productivity capabilities. So, and thinking about security, look, please do consider reading our digital defence report. It might be something of surprise to some of our listeners today that Microsoft is actually the largest security vendor in the planet now. We're actually 10 times larger than the nearest company that calls itself a security vendor. We're tracking these sorts of numbers, 65 trillion signals every day, and we share that signalling. Actually, the FBI, Australia Federal Police, Interpol, Scotland Yard really appreciate the data that we're able to give them in terms of signallings of the various different threat actors that are out there, whether they're nation-state actors. I won't mention the countries, you probably know who I'm talking about, and the threat groups which are out there, which are those cybercrime organisations that are out there. And again, we're giving telemetry back to the various law enforcement organisations. That digital defence report, it's really light reading. It's about 110 pages long, but incredibly worthwhile, even if you read the executive summary, to appreciate that, wow, Microsoft has 8,000 people whose day job is to protect what you have as your data in the business. So red teams, cyber forensics teams, teams that come into your office if you've been hit, and I know a number of instances here, right here in Australia, where organisations haven't deployed the technology and have been hit, that our teams have come in to help them. And that, millions of organizations around the world now have standardized on Microsoft security. Coca-Cola is noteworthy. They had 80 different security vendors. 80. And by standardizing on Microsoft, they reduced all that to a handful, not all Microsoft, but a handful, and saved themselves an inordinate amount of money while improving their defense posture. This is a little slide I actually produced a number of years ago, but I like using it because it does really quite well represent what you've bought, but many people don't use. So again, the Biotech team is there to help you with implementation, not just that column 3, which is productivity and collaboration, Teams and Word and Excel, but look to the left in terms of managing the applications, detecting shadow apps, making sure we've got reliable modern desktops in the organization, laptops, iPhones, Android devices that might be out of scope now, getting that picked up. But then on the right-hand side, this is the right-hand side at the moment, is really starting to be used as people seek to adopt AI. They need to think about retention policies, governance, monitoring the documents that are being used. The sharing or oversharing of information is something we really need to be conscious of. So bringing in guardrails and labeling of documents is such a critical point. Now, you do need to think about moving your data from those, classic F drives, G drives, M drives that you've had as file shares. Many of you may still be running file shares in your business. The classic click on the icon and drill down a few folders. They do need to move into cloud file shares, things like SharePoint, Teams, and OneDrive. But of course, once it's there, it's part of the Microsoft Graph, along with its mates, the calendars, the chats, the meetings, the messages you've got. And then you have this thing called a semantic index, which is a little bit like how our brains work. If I said the word elephant to you now, you were actually probably thinking, oh, it's got big ears. If it's in Africa, it's got little ears in India. It's got a trunk, it's got feet, it's got toes. Well, in the same way, the way in which this semantic index works isn't just a fixed word search like a Google search. This is using semantics. And so you could use other words and it can still bring back similar sorts of results because of that semantic context. But so important, that right-hand side is about sensitivity labeling, restricted permissions that should be applied to the content before you, deploy this technology to everybody. And I mapped here what we're seeing as those 5 big challenges that businesses see today. First of all, that XDR component, and thank you if you've bought Business Premium or E3FI, you've actually got the best XDR local defense product on the market. Again, thanks to MITRE and AAA reviews. If you aren't using Azure as a cloud, maybe you're using AWS for your infrastructure or maybe using GCP. It's interesting to note that the biggest used security and governance product on their clouds is actually Microsoft Purview technology to help protect the data estates that exist in the non-Microsoft cloud as well. So it's multi-cloud and multi-device. I was at the Apple store the other day and we were doing a recording of how they use Defender on Macs and iOS because they feel it's the best defense product, and Intune and Copilot on those devices as well. So if you're an Apple client, fantastic. Apple loves Microsoft security. And identity is such a critical element. It's all about identity. Since the last time I ever thought about security being at a device level was when I used terminals in a mainframe, when I had to go to the office. But ever since I've had the ability to get on the internet, you've got to think of your perimeter as where people work, which is in homes, in cafes, in airports, on planes. As I was flying from Brisbane today on a flight, I was getting Wi-Fi access. The perimeter is the people and ensuring that their identities are safe. And this is something that the team at Biotech can help you with. This is really stepping through the process of getting to better know your data. They can help navigate through the business and see all those external data sources, as we had a question from Eddie. I've got construction software. How do I connect to construction software? Thank you, Eddie. Yes, you picked up on the fact by using the Copilot Studio or what my daughter's company created in terms of co-counsel. They will access various different systems beyond just the Microsoft graph environment. We've obviously then got to protect it, encrypt it, define visual markings and watermarking. We've got to enable data loss prevention. I actually often will jump straight from multi-factor authentication as a first discipline to turning on data loss prevention so you can be compliant to or adhere to notifiable data breach and privacy acts in Australia, and then governing the retention policies and the delete of those documents as well. So to help in that space, this is a very busy slide, so be patient. I'm not going to talk to all these circles, but please, if you're interested in any of these circles in the main are all available. Everything there is available in E5 subscription. The bit you don't get with E5 is that bottom left, which is automatic labeling. So automatic labeling is saying, I know that this has got a tax file number, it's got a credit card number, it's got a personally identifiable piece of information in it. You get that with E5, but you only get manual labeling in the E3 and the business premium product. What does that mean? It means more dependence on your staff when they open a document to classify the document in that way. Now, there are ways in which you can run routines to go and do that for you, but in the main, it's either automatic or manual. But I digress. There's a lot there that you may or may not be aware of that you bought. And I guess many of us hear that there's this cost of living crisis, that it's going to be a function of the next election. And maybe your business is under a little stress. Something that might relieve some of that stress is by reducing or consolidating or rationalising the security vendors you've got in your business, and just realising you've actually bought the best that's going in business premium, and the biotech people can help you replace that expense by turning what you've already got in an integrated and best of breed manner with the security suite that is in Microsoft. Now, I'm not going to talk this slide. I'm conscious of time here, David, but this is actually, there's a video up on YouTube that can talk people through if they want to understand how the Copilot works, starting from the prompt with inside the applications, grounding that. Grounding is really about creating responsibility. So we don't accept foul language. We don't accept gender bias or racial bias. We don't permit it to generate inappropriate jokes. So all that grounding on the pre and the post is about removing all of that information in the communications to not only create a level of responsibility, but adherence to what we consider ethics as per the definition by the United Nations. Those ethical standards are built with inside the model to ground it. And then it goes to the large language model, which does all the clever things the brain runs. But your data is not retained in that model. Your data stays in the graph, all right? And then you get your response. So I ended up talking to it, and I didn't mean to, David. But I do find it fascinating what we do to get people those quick productivity, reduce the mundane. Look, that's a bigger picture on the whole Microsoft security ecosystem. The security ecosystem we have, it's actually bigger than the Microsoft Windows business now. So it's a substantial investment we make, which includes experts. We've got 8,000 people whose day job isn't writing those products, but it's actually looking in the dark web where one of your employees' email address with their password might be up for sale, or where different hacks and codes and attacks are occurring. And we actually also, part of that team, their day job is attacking the attackers. And they've actually already been instrumental in taking a number of cybercrime organisations offline by infecting them back again to take them offline. So with that, I will pass back to David, and thank you all for giving me some time to share some insights around the opportunities, the good, sharing a few war stories in there as well, and giving you some enlightenment of where you can get to good again and great productivity. Thanks, David.
Thanks very much, Philip. Really appreciate that, and some really, really good insights there. Here at Vitech, we've taken a number of customers on the Copilot journey and also the digital transformation journey. So, Philip, you mentioned a few times there around the E5 licenses, consuming that, turning those services on, and there's a number of customers on today's webinar that is at various stages of that journey. What I wanted to talk about today was how can we get your organisation ready. I'm personally very excited about what Copilot and AI can do for our organisation here at Vitech, but also our customers. But as you probably picked up on, there's a little bit of preparation work that's required before we can reap the full benefits in a very safe controlled way in our organisations. So to take that complexity out of it, really it starts with our readiness assessment, or Microsoft's readiness assessment, and we taking you through that. So very excited to say that readiness assessment is free for our customers on today's webinar. And really what that looks at is it has a look at where your licensing is up to the moment, your organisational profile. We have a better understanding of where you're at today and what you're trying to achieve, and of course, the security side of things. Then we move into, I guess, our 3-step process, which is really about preparing your data. The benefits of Copilot, obviously, is having that personalized environment tailored to your organization, and gaining that data insights from your data. So we really need to prepare your organization, prepare that data. As Philip's been talking about quite extensively today, once it's prepared, we need to secure it. And then when we're ready to use Copilot, we obviously optimize those operations and make sure that we're getting the best insights out of the data available to Copilot in that environment. So what do we do to prepare your data? Now, some of you on the call today are at the start of their journey. They're maybe using some of those F drives or G drives, the company file servers that are on premise that Philip talked about. And some of you, quite fortunately, have taken that digital transformation journey and already have their files, personal files in OneDrive for Business, in team for the organization, they're in Teams or SharePoint. But it's really about being able to unlock all of that data and put it in an area that, one, Copilot can access, but two, the organization can secure. So it's about de-risking, moving your data to a essentially managed area, and unlocking all of those M365 capabilities that we've been learning about today. So once we've prepared your data and it's in the right location to be accessed by Copilot and secured by the tools, it's then about that platform security. So our process looks at securing your data, implementing things like multi-factor authentication or data loss prevention, endpoint security, all of those items that we've talked about, and Microsoft, being the largest security company in the world, is here ready to help you with that process. Now, we've heard a bit of a horror story around, I guess, students working out how much teachers earn, and I'm sure there's plenty of stories out there, but this is really where we're able to sit with each organization and customers and really get an understanding of what's the data and the insights that we would like out of Copilot and the data that we're presenting, and what guardrails that we need to put up. Because you might have certain, say, for example, the marketing department might need to know a lot of insights around products and research to be able to understand and develop future marketing campaigns. And there's a data set for them. And you might have an accounting department that needs to understand financial trends and to be able to put forward budgets. So it's about working with the organisation, understanding who needs access to what information, and being able to put those guardrails up. And that's our second stage of the process. Then we go into a data security and optimization stage. Now, this is around, again, that classification and labeling that we talked about, access control, data loss prevention, which we've also touched on today. The other one that we haven't really touched on is the deduplication of data. So quite often when we start this journey, especially if we're starting with an organization with a traditional file server, you might have version 1 of the file, version 2, version 3, version 4. So you've got multiple versions of these files that have archived over many years. So being able to understand the data that you've got, identify some duplicates of that data throughout this process is also a very important stage for us in this journey and getting you Copilot ready. So at a very, very high level, I know Phil's touched on the various elements there around security and training that we can help you with. But that's the three phases that we like to take a customer to go through to be Copilot ready. And then it's the exciting part, Phil. I think it's about understanding the insights. Is Copilot joining you with your meetings in Teams, or market research, or that productivity gains that are after? So if you wanted to join, get a bit of a better understanding of is your organisation ready for Copilot, we are offering today an obligation-free readiness assessment for Copilot. So if you've got your mobile phones, I've got the QR code up there. We will drop the link if you're on a computer to click on that, and all you really need to do, it's just a very simple form. It takes about 1 minute. I think it's first name, last name, email address, company name, and 2 or 3 questions. And yeah, so if you're joining on a computer, you should be able to click from the webinar. Otherwise, just get your phones out and look at the QR codes there. I think we're pretty much at time now, Philip. I think we're open for question and answers for those people who need to leave, because we are almost at time. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Hopefully you've gained a few insights around Copilot and how we can make your organisation ready. Please, if you've got any questions, type it in the chat box, and we'll go through them all. And look, if you're like me and you think of something at 8 o'clock tonight and I wish I'd asked that question, we've got the inquiries at viatech.com.au email address as well. I can see a couple of questions being typed out, but just whilst we're on the line, Philip, we started out this afternoon that you've spoken to a few organisations, and we talked about the sentiment. From talking to the partners and businesses, what are some of the most common questions that you're getting, or people that are curious about around Copilot and AI? I think you're on mute.
I am on mute.
We need a Copilot. We need a Copilot for webinars, don't we?
And it's really interesting. Teams even says you're on mute because it can hear the noise, and then that is very good. So I think the question is about common questions. It's really hard to actually come with a common. It's quite diverse, the sets of questions. The broad questions. Is it good for me? This sounds bad for me. I like having a conversation. It's actually both, for the reasons I gave through the time you very kindly offered to share some thoughts. What's your favourite prompt is a common question I get. And so one of my favourite prompts that I use a lot is just in the free Copilot. Just go to copilot.microsoft.com in your Edge browser. Actually, this works even not in an Edge browser because it's the free service, and I'm not linking in to work with this question. I was buying a tennis racket recently, and I asked it, compare the top 3 selling tennis rackets under $300 in a table. And it just went to the web, and it found in areas that were close to me, people who were selling tennis rackets under $300, and it created a nice little table talking about the brand, the price, the provider. And I ended up looking at one of those and going to the shop, because buying a tennis racket is a very personal thing, and didn't end up buying one of those 3, but it was really insightful. The other one I did, I got that mold I was telling you about before we joined the call. Everybody, there's a lot of mold in Sydney right now. It's growing, and I've got it at my house. As I was saying to David and the team, my sandstone, which looks that lovely Cindy sandstone colour, is very much like the rolling hills of Ireland at the moment, covered in moss. So I asked it to compare Wet and Forget with 30 Seconds, which are 2 products for doing the cleanup, in a table. And it talked about the chemical elements, the effectiveness, what I had to do as a process. And so by doing that, I could see the difference. And then the price per litre or coverage area, I could see, and I won't see the answer, but it helped me decide on the product to buy to address the needs that I had in that. Now, that's free. That simple compare, you go to copilot.microsoft.com. Now, what is also free is if you do use your work account, which is your Microsoft 365 kind of sign-on, and you are using an Edge browser, you can actually copy data from your work environment and ask questions across the real estate of data in your environment to get answers. So one we used to have to do for our management was, categorize how you spent your time last month. So now one of my favorite prompts is, looking back in the last month in Teams and Calendar, categorize in 5 segments how I spent my time as a percentage.
Yeah, wow.
And it comes back in a couple of minutes, and each month it will change with the categories and the percentage of time, internal meetings, external meetings, presenting, doing learning. It comes back in all those different categories. Now, my boss could do that, but it's a conversation starter with my boss to show how I spent my time in the last 30 days. But an inordinate time saver. You think about that if you have to look back at your last month, how you spent your time.
Yeah,
I can just ask that question and it's done.
Absolutely. I think there's a couple of Vitek managers on this webinar, and they're probably taking notes around productivity and where they've spent their time. I've just got a question here around data sources. So we talked about our data being in Teams, OneDrive for Business, SharePoint, etc. Is it just restricted to Microsoft programs as data sources, or what data sources can we provide to Copilot to be able to help us through gaining insights or that productivity gains that we talked about?
Yeah, it's a good question, David. And if I may, I'd break it into 2 types of broadly data sources. Those unstructured things like PowerPoint presentations, Word documents, Excel, though that is kind of structured in the way it works with cells and the like. But Teams conversations, chats, emails are all very much unstructured. Now, that stuff does need to sit inside the Microsoft Cloud, or what I used the term there was the Microsoft Graph. But it can be connected to external data sources. As Eddie asked a question earlier, they use construction software. By using Copilot Studio or Azure AI Studio, you can connect into those data sources, be respectful of the permissions that those various different third parties products might have. So you've got to map the identity that you have in the Microsoft 365 world to an identity that exists in that line of business, because otherwise any user could ask any question of that database. So, in that construction software, maybe you're only able to see the projects you're associated with in that construction software. In a legal software construct, maybe you're only able to see the matters and the clients to which you're assigned. So again, that mapping needs to be done. But to answer the question in a simple way, yes, you can connect to these external data sources, structured data sources, such as ERP, accounting, general ledgers, account receivable, warehousing solution, construction software. For Eddie, sales system, and indeed we make some out of the box to work with things like Salesforce, HubSpot, the full range of Dynamics products for ERP, accounting, financial services, field services. I'm running out of air here, but there's a lot of connectivity. And if it doesn't exist, there's 2 options. You use Copilot Studio, which you actually get a license to when you have Microsoft 365 to connect to those external sources. And there's Azure OpenIS Studio, which is a little more detailed programmer type connectivity to extend the accessibility. Now, we have asked a question here also, the one from Mark. You okay to pick up on that one, David?
I was just about to ask that one and maybe rephrase it a little bit. And we talked about, I guess, data loss prevention and classification of files and data. And what Mark's specifically asking is can Copilot scan for sensitive data, such as driver's license, passport, Medicare information, all of that sort of stuff, because it's such a major problem. Maybe I might throw to you a bit of my sort of line of thinking there is Copilot the right tool to scan for that data? Or have we got some other tools that might be more appropriate in preparation for Copilot to be used?
And you've got the right answer there, David. It's not Copilot that does the scanning. It's the sensitivity. It's our Purview technology, Purview as the foundation to detect a driver's license, to classify what a driver's license looks like, to classify what a Medicare number looks like, to define what a passport looks like. And we actually have classification templates, right? So if you're working with tax file numbers, the 3.3.3. kind of configuration. In the healthcare industry, things like blood types, different conditions, the HIPAA kind of classification, you can just roll those out of the box and give that to Purview and say, I need to use the HIPAA classifications.
Absolutely. And if you remember back to one of my slides, that pyramid where it was around preparing your data, securing and optimizing, that's where we help organizations in those three phases. Is stage one, getting the data in the right place, i.e. being in the Microsoft ecosystem. Stage two is really securing, understanding what data you've got there, and we've got the Microsoft tools to be able to help us there, and some playbooks that we've used and developed over time to work with our customers to really take that manual process of tagging the data and automating and finding that for you. So that's a question, Mark. I think we've got another one, maybe one more.
So, Mark, the answer to your question is yes, it exists. It's called Purview, and Copilot is empathetic to that. It respects Purview's classification, which is automatic based on that. So, sorry, David.
That's all right. I think we've probably got time for one more question. I think Rob is asking about GitHub and analyzing a website, and maybe can we use Copilot to analyze a website and make suggestions based off web-based industry programs.
Yeah, so it wouldn't actually be GitHub, which is a programming and development tool. So if you're looking at doing analysis to improve, optimize a website, if that website sits in Azure, we've just released another Copilot. Yes, we have another aeroplane in the fleet, and this one's called Azure Copilot, or Copilot for Azure. So if that website's sitting there, you can ask Azure, optimize this website, improve its performance based on these industry programs. And you can also use Copilot Studio to introduce a chatbot to your website. So maybe you don't have to go out there and write a bot. It will actually look at your website. It'll trawl through your website. It'll understand all the attachments and the PDFs and the policy documents and terms that are publicly available. And it'll surface a bot that then your users can come to and say, well, what's the policy around fire damage on a home, 3 bedrooms, living in this particular part of the world? And it's in your policy document. Person doesn't have to read 300 pages of the policy document. It's in there. It'll find it and bring that back to the user so they get a quick answer to it. So it's not GitHub. It's actually a function of Azure to do the improvement of the website if you've got your website in Azure, to give you that idea. And then if you'd like to do the improving a website, then in a particular industry, it would be using something like Copilot Studio, or Azure AI Studio, which then can give you those chatbot type options over your existing website.
Short answer is it can be done, which is really exciting. So
right tool for the job, though.
Yes.
Just because it's I only know how to use a hammer, I shouldn't be putting screws in with that or chopping wood, right? So pick the right tools. A lot of tools, and the team at Viatech can help you understand the right tool for the job at hand.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for that. And look, I think in the interest of time, I really appreciate everybody attending today's webinar. Philip, thank you so much. I understand that you've got a very busy schedule, so I do appreciate your time this afternoon. And look, if you do have any questions, inquiries@viatech.com.au, and please make sure that you sign up for the readiness assessment. And look, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.